There was a time years ago when I was in the closet and desperate to stay there. I didn't want anyone to know what I really felt. And it wasn't that I was ashamed of those feelings that I couldn't stop myself from having, but I was afraid of being shamed by others for having them. I was scared that if my neighbors found out, they'd stop chatting with me over the fence when I was working in the yard. I was worried that if it got out, I'd lose friends. Maybe my family would distance themselves from me. I might even lose my job. It was an awkward time. Kind of a frightening time. I was always wanting someone who would be safe to confide in, even if they didn't share my feelings. But when I'd find someone I thought might be safe, there's just no way to really know. No way to know until I'd already stuck my neck out when it's too late. I'd be so incredibly careful in those conversations. Don't reveal too much. Figure out a way to hint at it, euphemistically and in microscopic increments, bit by bit, nibble by nibble, bite by bite, and, just keep watching for any signs of discomfort or disapproval. And for God's sake, never just blurt it out. No matter how much you might want to just come out and say it, no matter how overwhelming the impulse is to stop lying to everybody might be. There's just no way to really know what the consequences will be until they've come down on your head. Light as a feather or heavy as a ton of bricks, each one of them with a hate message secured to it with like a string or a shoelace or cheap elastic bands. I knew there were almost no people out there who would even tolerate what I felt, who I really was, let alone anyone who felt the same way I did. I had seen the wreckage of other people's lives, people who had come out voluntarily or had been outed against their will, careers destroyed, reputations ruined, shunned among friends or family, subjected to threats, demonization, false accusations, and even violence. But I couldn't help the way I felt. And I would never ever feel ashamed of it. But I was terrified of what other people might do to me if they knew. I kept thinking, is this a conversation I want to have with my mom? Is this something I want to have to explain to her? Or, my friends, or, the parents of my children's classmates. Online, it's really easy to be open. Everybody's anonymous if they want to be. And yeah, there were people like me out there. You hook up on some forum, you spill your guts, you wade in their guts. And that was enough for quite a while. It was enough to kind of just type my heart out into a box made of nothing more than electrons and code and have somebody reflect that back to me and give me some validation. But the world of meat and bone and blood and consequences? Fuck that. Get out your thumb screws, your bone saws, and your tasers. Do your worst. I will never fucking tell. Eventually, I started writing for a website devoted to my particular affliction. I knew what the attitude of the public was to this forum and these ideas, these feelings and thoughts. Disapprobation, accusations of perversion and immorality, vilification, intolerance. Every single journalist who even mentioned people like me had nothing good to say. We were the bad people. We were corrupting society. We were hurting others, and we should be silenced or stamped out altogether. But I found something at that website, a kinship with others of the same persuasion as me. I felt more confidence. There's nothing better when you're feeling isolated and alone than knowing there's somebody out there, anybody, who feels the same way you do. Knowing that there were at least a few people, who understood me. That was one of the most incredible things that could have ever happened to a misfit like me. One day my editor asked if I was willing to think about putting my real name, in my byline. I remember that morning. I was in my house coat. I had crust all over my eyes, and I had the fucking insane bedhead that I get, that only short-haired people can get. I was one sip into a huge cup of coffee, and I just stared and stared and stared at that message, and my heart was just like pounding. My real name. That's my real life. I mean, my life wasn't much to speak about. It just wasn't that important. It wasn't great. I had so little. And that meant that I had almost nothing to lose. But the fact that I had almost nothing made it all the more precious to me. My kids, my parents, and my sisters. That crap job that I had at the time that barely paid the bills. A billionaire could lose $1 billion and never ever end up sleeping on a heating grate in the rain. The person I was then, I was always just 1 month away from losing the roof over my head. I told him I would think about it, and I thought about it. I realized that if no one was willing to do that, to put their name on it, to put their face on it, to put their reputation on it, if no one was willing to actually come out, nothing was ever going to change. Part of being accepted is saying, here I am. I'm a real person with a real life and real people and things I care about, and I have a name and a face, and I'm really not that different from you. And if no one ever has the guts or the recklessness or the stupidity or the nobility to do that, then we're just all stuck in the closet. Just usernames on obscure forums on the internet, indulging in our publicly condemned perversion within the privacy of our own lives, changing nothing. A few hours later, when I was dressed and presentable and feeling more solid, I told my editor to go ahead and put my real name in my byline. About an hour later, someone sent me a message linking me to a video. It was a few days old by that point. It revealed my real name. And it's crazy, but even despite the fact that I had just revealed my real name, I just felt my heart jump upwards and my stomach jump downwards, because I knew that the person who had made this video and revealed this information was doing it with the intent towards harming me. They knew who I was, and they had only discovered that because they'd gone looking for it with the intent to harm me. They wanted to hurt me, my career, my life, my relationships, my reputation. But after that sinking feeling in my gut and that rising feeling in my heart, life went on. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my house. I didn't lose my kids. I didn't get disowned by my family. Yeah, I lost a few friends, but none of the friends who were really close to me. My bosses, when I went out of my way to prepare them for what might come, all the potentially angry phone calls they might receive, they were all just indifferent or even sympathetic. My coworkers were understanding and supportive. My parents were proud of me. My niece, who was 22 years old at the time, said she admired me because of the courage it took to be out and proud. Life went on. It went on for me. It got better. Then at some point, I came up with kind of an idea, and I kind of just like fielded it in comment sections and, see how people would receive it. A yearly International Coming Out Day. I thought of the people who had paved the way for me, people whose lives had been disrupted and even destroyed, people who had faced threats and violence and social isolation years or decades before I had suffered my own crisis of coming out or being outed. I thought to myself, these people, they have sacrificed so much, and it would be kind of cunty to me to refuse to even so much as reveal my name and my face in support of their sacrifice. So many unsung heroes, so many armies of one. Aaron Pitsey, Angry Harry, so many of them who gave up so much to do what's right and make things easier for people like me. I felt like the fact that I had hidden for so long, that I had chosen to remain nameless and faceless, that was doing them a disservice. How could I have ever objected to or refused to add my voice to theirs? Because, with every person who comes out, unashamedly, unabashedly, unapologetically, the road for everyone else becomes smoother and less steep. At some point, my conversations with those random people in Meatspace I thought might understand became less tentative, less beating around the bush, less tap dancing around what I really am. And eventually, I just would come right out and say it. I'm an anti-feminist and a men's advocate. And what I learned from that was that what I had always been told by the mainstream was kind of bullshit. I'd always been told that my opinion was the opinion of a tiny minority of haters, loons, and extremists. But the pundits, the ideologues, the ivory tower academics, the mainstream media, and the government, all they've really done is convince the majority of the public that how they already feel and already think is taboo and not to be spoken of. That it's wrong, even though it's the majority opinion. They're shaming most of society exactly as they tried to shame me. Back when I feared coming out, it wasn't the majority of society who had my neck in a noose. It was a tiny minority of elitists, academics and opinion makers, politicians, government bureaucrats, and credentialed experts, activists, lobbyists, and pundits. When I actually started talking to real people, the real people invariably told me, "Yeah, you're okay. You have a point, come to think of it." And that was when I realized that my mission wasn't even about changing people's minds. It was about convincing people That what they already think and feel isn't wrong or sinful or immoral or unethical or hateful. It wasn't about any person's thoughts. It was about giving people the moral permission to openly express them. What they're hearing from their TV sets and their CBC radio programs and their university instructors and the establishment media is that they're just as horrible as I am for thinking and feeling the way I do. And if they come out and express their objection to feminism or their support for the equal rights of men and boys, they will pay a hefty price. But just like gays and lesbians, bisexuals and trans folk, the more people who are brave enough to put their names and faces out there, the less power anyone has to prevent others from doing the same. Every person who comes out, the less costly it is for the next, because the majority is with us, not against us, even if they don't realize they're in the majority. Since I realized that, I have never concealed what I do, or tried to sugarcoat it, or pussyfoot around it. And the consequences? A few outraged emails, a couple of nasty comments from people who obviously need mental health services, and a few sporadic attacks from people in positions of power that have been called out by others. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my kids or my family. I didn't lose my home. I didn't lose anything I could possibly miss. And I came to realize that this is our mission as anti-feminists and men's advocates. Our mission is not to change minds, but to convince people that what they already think and feel is not wrong. To convince the people who already feel as we do that they are not immoral for feeling it. And one of the ways that we can all do that is by contributing to anti-feminist men's issues advocacy in the meat and bone and blood world, in the brick and mortar world, in the world where there is no separation between names and faces and beliefs and actions. As long as most of us are in the closet and none are brave enough to come out, we are all more vulnerable. We are all considered less credible. This is why I'm asking people to throw a few shekels toward Honey Badger House. It's not some grandiose endeavor. It's not going to be a shelter for battered men or the headquarters for a helpline for men in crisis or some multi-purpose center where men can drop in and receive counseling for their mental health issues. What it will be is a real-world brick-and-mortar, meat, bone, and blood fuck you that exists specifically to support men's advocates who are anti-feminist. It will be unapologetic. It will be unashamed. It will be unafraid. It will stand in its spot and stare down the opposition, the powerful and wealthy minority elite who decry the existence of people like you and me. It will be an unequivocal assertion that we have the right to exist in the here and now, in the world of things and people, and not just the world of pixels and ideas. We have the right to be here, and if you object, then have at you. More than anything else, this is why I want this project to be funded. Because when I came out, I realized that I was an idiot to be afraid of coming out. But the one thing that is necessary to convince people to do that, to admit that they feel what they feel and think what they think, are real-world examples of people doing that and surviving it. And so long as every MRA and anti-feminist is just an anonymous commenter on the internet, the opposition will, by default, control the discourse. They'll be able to accuse us of being bigots, because if we weren't, we'd be willing to put our personal information where our mouth is. So long as the only brick-and-mortar initiatives, however humble, belong to the opposition, we will lose. Earl Silverman knew this. and he died in the service of that end. It's time we say, fuck it. No more men sacrificed on the altar of this cause. We are real or we are not. We believe in what we are doing or we do not. We are willing to make a sacrifice or we are not. We are willing to make a symbolic gesture that costs us $5 or we are not. We are willing to put our names or our faces or our dollars or our effort on the line, or we are not. And we are willing to understand that if we don't do it, we have no right to demand anyone else does. It's time for us to exist in the real world, in meat space. It's time for us to be real. It's time for us to give a subtle but effective middle finger to the people who oppose us by actually having a presence in the real world. And that's why I'm going to ask you to give $1 or $5 or $10 or $100 to Honey Badger House, because I'm hoping the existence of an actual space devoted to men's issues that is specifically opposed to feminism will pave the way for an army of ordinary people who will see that it's not the end of the world or of their lives to publicly support men's issues advocacy. Anyhow, that's all I have to say about that. And I guess I'll see you guys all later.